Let me first say that this video isn't status quo thinking, and it's okay if you disagree. You already know the standard methods of doing things, and you have your many big books to teach you that. But if you're looking to try new ideas, this is for you. Having said that, let's take it from the top. We have a limited time in our lives, we have a limited number of hours in a day, and we certainly have a limited time for each lesson that we teach. Time is the one true resource that is limited and we cannot get back when it's gone. Hence, we have to use our time wisely, and for that reason, there's a quote that says, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything. No matter what we set our eyes on, we can achieve it if we focus enough attention on doing particularly the few things. Well, at least there's a higher possibility. It's even Confucius who said that he who chases two rabbits catches neither. So this year, like I've done every other year and had only one significant thing I want to learn, this year my team is cutting. And so I've had this quote on my table at work which says, double down, cut to go up. In a previous video, I talked about prioritizing some aspects of our lesson in order to be more efficient. In this video, I want to talk about how to prioritize our students, also to be more efficient in our teaching. I can already see the comments, responses about this video, but you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I agree this is a controversial methodology. It's up to you to decide what to do with assets from my life experience that helps me be more efficient. So we'll look at 3 things going into this video. Number 1 is what exactly to do, that is how to prioritize students. Number 2 is what is the essence of doing this at all? And number 3, what usually prevents us from doing this particular thing. Now let's get to what to do and how to prioritize. So before we can do this, we of course have to first recognize and categorize our class. And I'll talk about this more in another video, but my guess is that we usually have a fair idea what the situation is in our class. There are certain times that some kids change positions, but generally not by much. So in tech, there's something called the law of diffusion of innovation, which was first written about by Professor Rajas. It shows the curve for the adoption of technology by customers. The curve actually goes something like this. And what I find particularly interesting about this curve, just like the Pareto principle, is that it applies to a lot of things in our life. For example, the performance of students in our class. So just like the innovation curve, in our class, innovators and early adopters will be the good students. The early and the late majority will be the average, whereas there's also laggards or the poor kids in our class. Now, the strategy here is simple. During every lesson or every class, push the good, carry the average, and then process the laggards. What do I mean by that? For the good kids, we want to give them the maximum push during the lesson because they are actually those who will carry us along during our lesson. They are the benchmark for the complexity of the topic. We should always look to this group first for participation and understanding, not ignoring the others, but using these ones to measure the starting pace of the lesson. If the good kids don't get it, we can best be sure that the laggards are asleep. So call for participation from them as early as possible. Let them be the first to model activities we want to perform. What we want to do is ascertain their standpoint in the lesson, and then we are rest assured that we can drift from them and focus a chunk of attention on the next group, which is the average. If the good get it faster, it will be relatively easy to reach the average with the topic for the day. And equally, if the good kids are slow to understand, best believe that it will take some time for the average kids also to get it. So we need to know our good kids and pay attention to them when they start giving feedback on their current state during the lesson. So for the average, they are the majority and they should be the main focus of the lesson. They are actually the benchmark for the complexity of our teaching method. If you're a lecturer at a higher level, most of the time you control the pace of your lesson. But if you're a teacher at a lower level, your students kind of control the pace of your lessons. So we have to strategize properly because we can neither let the good nor the bad control the pace of the class. Because we can't go home reaching only 20% of the class, and neither can we go home teaching only 20% of the content because we follow the pace of the slow students. Now, what exactly we want to do is adapt a teaching method that reaches a high percentage of the average kids. So, for example, if singing songs in the lesson gives a higher success rate, That's what we want to do. If playing games is what does it, that's what we want to do. If climbing trees is the trick, that's what we want to spend most of our time during the lesson doing. Not all, most of the time. So for the laggards, we want to make sure we have a procedure to fill them in or do our due diligence. They are the benchmarks for our integrity as a teacher. And the mindset we are trying to adapt is perfecting our strengths while giving opportunities to weaknesses to be better. Look, I get it. I'm not an idiot. A teacher is responsible to every student in the classroom. Of course, I'm not suggesting we ignore some kids. For the laggards, we can teach the same thing in different ways and in different lessons. That way, while the good kids enjoy it because it's presented in a different way, the laggards have the opportunity to come up to speed. So we can ensure that review periods in a lesson is actually aimed directly at laggards. Call them to answer questions. Get under their skins. One of the things I did is I used what I call a lesson quadrant. So the lesson is divided into 4 segments. And the last segment is a review aspect where I allocate about 10 minutes or the last 10 minutes and gather all the laggards and take them through what was learned one more time or one last time. What you want to do is involve them as much as possible. Involve parents also in the teaching process and ensure there's extra support outside of the lesson time. Although I'll tell you now that per my findings, talking to many parents, they are usually significantly responsible for the students' poor performance in the first place, either by being ignorant about how to help or simply ignoring the necessity to help. So, do the due diligence as a teacher and teach and involve laggards, but don't let them be the reason others don't learn more. If they can't come up to pace, just accept it and move on to the next topic. So, in summary, serve the good ones first, spend more time on the average, and as for the laggards, throw them a bait and see if they take it. If they do, push them up. If they don't, we'll have to fight another day. So, I read this book titled Winning by Jack Welch, who was a big-time CEO and led GE or General Electric to great success in the 1980s. And he describes something profound at the beginning of the book called differentiating, or 20-70-10. Basically, the rule that categorizes a workforce into top 20, middle 70, and then the bottom 10. And there's preferential treatment for each category. It may sound good for someone who is a top 20, but bad for someone who is a bottom 10. But also what he said about differentiating is that each of us is good at something. And I just believe we are the happiest and the most fulfilled when we are doing that. So, you'll mostly find that the top 20 in your class enjoy lessons the most. Not just the fun part of the lesson, but the topic itself. Whereas the bottom 10 usually don't. And that's just the way it is. Now, what exactly is the essence of doing this? Because we obviously want the best outcome during our lesson. What even led me to actually figure this out is that sometimes I would teach one lesson multiple times because of the laggards, and the good kids will sometimes flare up and say they don't want to learn this again. Yeah. Secondly, because I can tell you for sure that in a normal size class, we cannot teach and reach everyone at the same time. I don't have some statistical data to prove this, but I have been a teacher since before 2014, and at some point, I even gave computer science lectures to master's and undergraduate students, and I can tell you there's always good, average, and poor students. So in an audio by L. Nightingale that I heard somewhere in 2015, he said, the American system is standardized not to prevent the good from winning, but also to prevent the weak from losing. So the whole idea is not to focus too much on the weak and let the strong lose, and neither focus too much on the good and as a result just seal the fate of the laggards. So for instance, if the syllabus suggests teaching A, B, C, D, E, F, G in a day, and the good students can handle that, they lose if we end up teaching A, B, C, D because we focus too much on the weaker students. The weaker students also lose completely if we teach A, B, C, D, E, F, G and they grasp absolutely nothing. Life is all about finding the perfect balance, isn't it? Now, finally, what are some of the inhibitions that stand in the way of doing this particular thing, differentiating our students? I'd say the main one is because we feel a sense of responsibility towards laggards. Sometimes as a teacher, we may feel their bad performances are fault and we don't want to ignore them. and we hope we can somehow transform them. I understand that. The other reason is that sometimes we feel they paid equally to be in our class, and therefore we have to pay equal attention to them. There's that too, which is reasonable. So the biggest problem I feel about weaknesses is that we usually feel we can better them. And that's also true in some cases. If we listen to the story of someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger, who did bodybuilding and became one of the greatest of all time and started benching weights he thought impossible at first, we find that yes, indeed, sometimes it's possible to better our weaknesses. But most of the time, it's not. And which one do we want to take a gamble on, weaknesses or strength? Because the more time we focus on our weaknesses, the less time we focus on our strength. And eventually we end up with 2 average skills instead of 1 amazingly good skill. So we can fight it all we want, but generally laggards don't particularly go on to do anything significant or important with the topics they lag in. It's not that they are poor overall, but pertaining to particular subjects, that's just the case. There are exceptions, I agree, but generally this is the trend. I hope you find this useful. If you have any comments, leave them down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Love and peace.